Welcome to Season 3, Episode 4 of The Power of Five, where 5 behaviour change specialists come together to basically riff about all stuff leadership. What we talk about is how can we challenge our thinking, how can we create different actions when we're leading. And in this season, we're really excited to have invited a number of CEOs to find out what's happening in the real world out there and what's actually happening for CEOs and what can they share with us. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Peter Dubiez, who is the CEO of Sydney-based Enviro Frontier. So yay, again, another Aussie voice. I've been surrounded by Aussies and Canadians, Peter, so it's wonderful to have you here. Peter has taken his company global. He's now serving Australia, New Zealand, and Spain, and he'll be able to share the story. He's raised the bar in tree works with Enviro Frontier, being a leader in networked tree management, thanks to the IP software that he created called Tree Manager. Enviro Frontier collaborates with the University of Technology, Sydney, to enhance Tree Manager to be the leading data provider in regards to trees for the insurance and facility management market. They work closely with builders, loss adjusters, and direct to insurance providers to deliver national make safe and tended tree works. Peter has committed the company to provide a professional, honest, transparent, and reliable tree services along with outstanding customer service. So I first started working with Peter back in April 2018 when I took over as chair of the CEO Institute syndicate group that he belonged to. Peter remains in our group a seat of great wisdom, having experienced the GFC, having experienced COVID, and can you believe it, he went to set up his business in Spain right in the middle of COVID, leaving the safety of Australia. He's also recently been recognised in the APAC Top 100 Technology Fast Winner. So he's got many, many powerful leadership experiences that he can share today. And I'm excited for you all to meet him and naturally pick his brains. Be warned, he's an innovative thinker and he will challenge some of our mindsets with his thoughts. So I'm going to kick off very simply by asking a couple of questions and let Peter share some of his ideas and thoughts with us. So given the powerful experiences you've had, Peter, what are your top 3 pieces of leadership advice? And then secondly, as a leader who has taken his business global during a pandemic, please tell us what has been the most challenging aspect as a leader and the most rewarding aspect as a leader. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Mandy. Wonderful introduction. Appreciate being here. I think the 3 most important things for myself in leadership, and it's evolved over time. So my number 1, which is something that's really come to the forefront, probably only in the last 12 to 18 months, is know my individual purpose. And when I say that, it's actually words that really resonate with myself. And so I can be quite open and honest in that it's compassion. Sorry, excuse me. I know within myself that it's compassion, and I drive it through transparency. I drive it through vulnerability. And so part of it is encouragement. And so when I know those individual words myself, it's how I act in business every day. It's how I act in interchange with my staff. It's how I act in interchange with my family. It's how I act in interchange with my clients. And so it's something that really started to resonate with myself, and actually all my actions and activities drive off that. And so it's a key aspect, I think, a CEO sort of understands what's important to them, and then it resonates outwards in everything they do. The other part of it is, I think as a CEO, and I'm talking probably more as a business owner, you have to have a vision. And within that vision, you have to have trust within, and you have to have trust that the 1% activity that you're consistently doing is bringing that vision to the forefront. Because there's many a time where you see no momentum, you see no movement, you see absolutely nothing, and it just seems to be a Groundhog Day. But I truly believe that 1% activity is the key to actually delivering on a CEO or a business. And then part of that is never the actual outcome may actually not be what you envisioned. So I can go back 15, 20 years ago and always believed I was going to have a business that would service all of Australia. And I would have an office in Brisbane, and I'd have an office in Melbourne and another one in Perth. Well, the reality is I do have a business that services all of Australia, but because of the way technology is, we only have one office in Sydney. So the vision actually came true, but not necessarily how I perceived it 15 years ago. And I think the other important thing that as I said, it's a lot of big learnings have come out of COVID for myself. And I think as a CEO, you have to understand it's okay to have you time. And what I mean by that, as a CEO, we're generally always rushing to the next thing. I've got to get my phone in the morning. I've got to deal with this email. I've got to, and so it's, and because you're so driven by your time and how to be proficient in that time and how to be the best you can in that time. And the time is always about what's the next task? What's the next thing I need to get onto? What's the next decision I need to make? Whereas I've learned it's very, very important for a CEO, I believe, to actually be okay with my time, to be present for a certain period of time, whether it be during the day, the morning, but actually say it's okay to be here now. It's actually not, it's okay not to do something right now. It's okay to actually have some thought. It's okay to deal with the stress. It's okay to feel upset. It's okay to feel good. It's okay to feel grateful. It's okay to be mad, but just actually have that present time. And so they're probably the big drivers that I now have within being a CEO. The purpose, very important to me to understand that's part of me. The business is part of me, and the people that react around it are part of me. To always stick with that vision, regardless whether there seems to be no momentum. Am I faithful to doing the activities that are required to achieve that vision, the 1%ers? And thirdly, as I said, it's okay for me to have my time, quality time, thinking time. To wrap that up, with COVID, we were already committed to actually doing an exploratory setup in Spain. And the interesting thing with that is any setup or anything that I consider doing overseas, it's actually unknown. You actually don't know what the outcome's going to be. You're working on completely different times. You're dealing with different cultures. You're dealing with different languages. You're dealing with different demands. And what I mean by that, in Spain, everything's just all right. It's siesta time. We'll get to it when we get to it. Whereas Australia, we like bang, bang, yeah, but here's the agenda and here's the key topics, and theirs is, oh, well, yeah, we got some of it. So it's always going overseas an interesting aspect. We're always going to do it. And we looked at the cash forecast. We looked at the budget. We considered COVID, and we saw that it wasn't actually a risk, but it was actually a great opportunity for learning in terms of individual and at a business level. What I do think the greatest rewards coming out of it has been a lot of discovery, and I'll talk about, and I'll say self-discovery. And so coming out of that, living in a country where COVID is rampant, dealing with people that have been through world wars, inquisitions, you name it. Spain's had it all. So it's just it's just another little blip in our lifespan. And so I had a very belief that during COVID, it became very important. I think what I saw from Australians, that it became an I perspective. Do I have a job? Am I got money to give to my family? How am I going to survive? Will I have a business? So it became a very I-driven perspective. And the I was driven even more so by us being fortunate to shut down our borders. Then it became we'll shut down states, and then we'll even shut down certain suburbs. And so it even drove more I perspective into it. the difference I actually saw in Spain is there really was an I. It's hard to explain. There was an I because it was about all. We've lost the battle, so now it's about all. What are we doing for each other? What are we doing for all? And so that's where I took a lot of, I guess, self-discovery. And again, it drove back to purpose. What am I willing to do for all? And yes, the interesting thing, to do for all, it has to be driven from I. So it was a flip side of it. And so, yeah, so the most rewarding was that we actually got on with it. There was a fear around it. COVID to me is, and I know I've mentioned it in my CEO Institute, when you're afraid of heights, you know if you go to that cliff, there's the height. If you're afraid of a spider, you see the spider. With COVID, because it's unknown, I think it's the greatest opportunity for CEOs to discover, how do you deal with the unknown? How do you actually become flexible enough? How do you make sure your staff feel secure and comfortable? And so I saw COVID actually as a life experience, not purely as a evil pandemic. So hopefully that sums up sort of my 3 keys and sort of the value in Spain. Spain, we're proceeding. We've got a business developer now who's looking a bit further into it for us. I still will be going back in September, probably for a month or 2. The only thing that frustrates myself is the quarantine. In reality, it's not going to Spain. I felt very safe in Spain. It's just the quarantine back in Australia is the frustrating aspect. I'm hoping my AstraZeneca injection, which I get next week in August, I will actually avoid the 2 weeks quarantine when I return.
Thanks, Peter, for sharing. And I know I can share the impact that you've had on our CEO group around the focus on self and purpose, and the rituals that you have around meditation, around, being very mindful of being present. And I know that's something very dear to Catherine's heart. So I'm going to hand over to Catherine.
And you see me chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
I want to take this guy out for dinner and talk to him about all of this amazing stuff. I mean, Peter, you clearly are role modeling and living this notion of the curious and mindful and present human-centered leader, which is we're very passionate about that, and even bringing that into this sense of, one of the most important roles leaders have is when there is a lot of chaos and uncertainty, right? People are looking to you for what do we do next. And when you can role model this, like, I don't know, but let's stay curious and explore together. Wow, that in and of itself is super cool. And I love the fact that you brought up the really important notion of white space, like taking time to just stare at the whiteboard, right? That too is a valuable use of your time. My question is, how do you cultivate that sense of curiosity and exploration and investigation and presence and taking time for self-care with the folks who report to you and I guess, throughout your entire organization? How do you cultivate that in others?
It's an interesting question because I'm still learning myself. And I think the first step for myself is awareness, because I definitely jumped to some decision making or wanting to make a decision or response, an emotional response. And so the first thing I'm learning is awareness. Okay, yep, I've just noticed that trigger. Doesn't mean I always catch it quick enough, but am I aware that I've done that? And so then it's from there I take conversations. And even yesterday with one of our people just talking about it's okay just to take some time, to take a day off, to don't feel that obligated that you have to be at work. Yeah. And so I always try and mirror image my expectations and my demands on myself, and then look at the staff or the people and say, what would I do in their place? So what I'm learning more and more is to get into their box. So how do I get in their box? How do I look from the inside, outside, left space, right space, and actually spend time understanding their emotions and what their response would be? And then how do I cater, or how do I understand that and then respond accordingly?
Yeah. Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good on
I
you.
just want to tag on to that, Catherine. Like, the self came up a lot, the self-discovery, the self-care, but I absolutely love, and I want to like hug you through my computer Zoom. I hope that's not awkward. But you started with purpose, your purpose, and everything starts with your purpose. And I just, you know, it really speaks to me for a lot of reasons, but that's really where it starts for all of us, like way beyond the job and the dollars and all of that. And I just wanted to thank you for saying that. And also by sharing that, by giving other people permission to do the same. So there's not really a question there, but I just really wanted to thank you, because I don't hear that a lot from a lot of leaders.
I think it's, and I think for me personally, as I said, I understand my purpose is inspire, encourage, and listen. And I achieve that through my compassion, my vulnerability, and my transparency. So I've learned, if I learn to live those words, then the actions and activities follow. It definitely took a while, because I would get mixed up with purpose was, oh, my purpose in this job is this, or my purpose is this, rather than saying, no, it's a greater good. We might just say a greater good. And how do I understand those words? And definitely, you know, even the word, when I say compassion can work two ways. So that, you know, that's part of it. And so I say compassion is sometimes that person isn't right for the business. And so compassion is actually telling them you need to move on. You know, and so I'm learning the understanding, or the multi-layers that can come to a word, rather than potentially what I think the one word may be. There's actually multi-layers. So some people may say, oh, compassion is you can't let them go, you can't fire them. Well, compassion is actually sometimes firing them.
Peter, you talked earlier about having a vision, and part of that was that you may have a vision and you get to the end of it and it may not look the way you expected. And I think one of the things I see with a lot of business leaders and company owners is they chart that 5-year or the 10-year plan, or whatever vision that they have for the organization, and then they get 3 or 4 years into it and realize it's not what I was expecting at all, or maybe it's not going as well, and so they see that as a failure. What would you say to a leader who had this vision, but maybe things have taken a hard left, or maybe it just doesn't look like you were expecting, and they see that as a failure? What would you say to them?
I would say, you know, and the fact is, those that have succeeded have just failed more than others. That's the truth behind it. That's all it is. And so, as I tell my staff, my aspect is, I want you to fail. If you're failing, it means you're learning. All right, and it's about us also learning. And so I would, in my business, this isn't, you know, I was the person with fat thumbs cutting trees down. Okay, that's where I came from. So the business has morphed, and we've been able to go with it. But at the same time, it's failed in a lot of areas. That it you know, I can go back to 2014, 15, and my goodness, I was going to be sitting on a sandy beach in the next 3-4 years, and I was going to give Jeff Bezos a run for his money, and you know, and then no, it went this way very quickly. So I think it's just learning to adapt, review. It's only a failure, and I say catastrophic failure, if you choose to do nothing about it. If you choose to play the victim role and you choose to play the suffer, then yeah, the worst type of failure, but always be prepared you're going to fail. Some of them can be absolutely catastrophic. Fortunately, most of them are minor ones consistently every day, and just learn to adapt. And that's what I think, especially in the world we're in now, the speed of technology, the speed of everything happening around us, the speed of COVID, failure just seems to happen more prolifically.
Hey, Peter, I got a question for you. Because you talked a lot about the unknown and so on, and making decisions in that environment, right? And it seems more and more that leaders or organizations value fast decisions or popular decisions over taking the time to invest in doing the work it takes to get to the right decision. What advice do you have for leaders around, taking that time to get to the right decision?
I'll probably go back a bit what I said to Joel's comment as well. I look at it and say, yep, you've got the vision. Let's have an aspect around it. Let's do some, if we've got to do workshopping or we've got to get decision around it, but then be involved. I think the challenge is most of them, not going to say the challenge, again, I'll go back because they're always my learnings, at the end of the day, where I've believed, yep, I've got it all clear. There, it's on the whiteboard, go run with it. And 3 months later, well, that's not what I wanted. Why have you, what's that mean? So I've learned now, no, get involved and actually, again, be present during the actual workshop or the task, even if it's only half an hour, be present, listen, is that what I wanted? Is that where we're going? All right, do we need to take a little detour? Do we need to stay where we're going? And I think, yes, and then you're catching it. You're able to change very rapidly. Whereas if you wait 3 months and then say, now we've got to divert, it makes it a lot harder because you go, well, hold on, we're 3 months down the road. We've invested in this. This is the way we're going. We're not going to take a back step anymore. And I think for us as a small dynamic business, we deal with a lot of legacy businesses, big businesses. And again, I actually see that seems to be their approach. Well, no, we've gone 3 or 4 months down this, so we're just going to plow ahead now. We've dropped a couple of million into it, and it's got my, it's got my signature on it, so I can't afford to fail. But my learning is as a CEO, get involved, even if it's just 30 minutes a week, to sort of say, yep, you're on track, or no, let's see what else can come out of it, and then recorrect the ship. You're the captain of the ship, basically. Captain of the ship has to, at some point, had his hand on the wheel or be guiding the person with the hand on the wheel.
Yeah, thanks. I think, Peter, and obviously I know the story, so if you can succinctly share it, I think what you've just stated there is that whole difference between the pendulum of, I got to let go of control or take control, but there's that middle space of empowerment, which means about being present with people. And we've talked quite a lot about that on the Power of Five. And I always remember you sharing your story of your son. So Peter's son went to camp, a soccer institute really, in camp in Spain. And I always loved the story that you shared around how these young boys were they were empowered to take accountability. And if they failed, they felt the consequence of failure, and how that taught you so much about leadership. Could you just share just very quickly what you learned from that experience?
Look, my son's my mentor. Okay, so he's 16 years old, took himself off to Spain when he just turned 15 because he wanted to be a professional football player. Went by himself, unknown, decided, again, different language, new school, new curriculum. And he was put in a position where it really became, he had to learn himself. So he came from, you know, then you do your own washing. If you get sick, you don't have mummy and daddy bringing you chicken soup. It's your job to learn what you need to do. It's his job to get up in the morning. It's his job to motivate himself. It's his job to understand the 1%. Am I doing my 1% is to constantly keep improving. So if a 15-year-old can do it, realistically, any adult should be able to achieve that and get on par with it. And for the players there, it very much is an absolute learning phase in terms of be prepared to fail. The most important thing one of the coaches told him about, he said, the beautiful thing about football is just a game of failures. The team that fails the least ends up actually scoring the most goals. That's it. And so when a youth or a player can understand that that's what football is just a game of failures, and you can grasp it and understand it rather than beat yourself up. And especially you're talking 16-year-old boys, you know, adults no different. Rather than beat yourself up, learn to say, okay, what's the next task? What's the next task? And so for leaders and CEOs, and I can only talk for myself personally, it's constant discovery. It's constant achievement. Doesn't mean every day I want to get out of bed, all right? You know, and I think I've said it to Mandy before, I never, and anything we say to a client, I never seek out to achieve 100% perfection. And the reason being, the only time I think and I truly believe I'll be 100% perfect is when I actually die, because I actually probably can't improve on that at that point. So up to then, every else is about failure and improving. And so, you know, I have a son that's a fantastic mentor to me, 16, in Spain. And then you know, and I think for any CEO, we are here empowered to make our lives, and by making our lives more beneficial, we're actually empowering the staff around us, we empower our family, and we actually then have a global impact on everyone.
What a way to end. Thank you, Peter, for sharing your experiences and your stories. And I know all of us are very holistic. We love to look at, you know, family life as well as work life. So thank you for sharing that story. And thank you for sharing your amazing experiences with us. And thank you to my colleagues in the Power of Five, and enjoy listening the episode and scribbling lots of notes, everybody, and come back for the next episode in a few weeks. But thank you so much again, Peter. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Really
Peter.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.
Everyone have a great day.
Yeah.
It's only going to get better.